It helps us because we get our money in chunks in various places throughout the year. It doesn't all come evenly. It doesn't all come at once. At the end of the year, we'll get a large part of our state funding, but we've already spent most of that money. So this is the fund balance helps us maintain that. We have a healthy capital projects fund, and we have that, and we put the money in there so that we don't have to borrow money to do these capital projects. Because if we were borrowing money and paying 4 or 5% interest, in the end you pay for it 1.25 times, 1.5 times until you pay it all off. So we're very lucky that we don't have to go to the bank and borrow money every time we want to fix a roof or replace a field or those things. We're very lucky we have that money set aside. So that's what we use those dollars for. The district years ago decided to put money aside for PZERS, and that's good. But I always had a problem with that concept, just myself, because PZERS to me is a recurring expense. Every year it's there, and every year for the last 10 years or 15 years, it's been increasing. So you have to keep up your budget each year to that, and you have to put a sustainable revenue source in to pay for that, because it's always going to go up. And so plugging that hole with an unsustainable resource just makes that problem even bigger when you do fall off that cliff and you run out of money. So it's okay. It's okay to do what you're talking about doing it, but everything comes with a limit. So you just have to be careful that you don't take it too far, because you are limited every year to the amount of taxes you can increase by Act 1. And if you don't take that, it's not like you can come back the next year and get that. It's once and done. Once it's gone, you can never regain that. That 3 mills this year, if the board doesn't put that in place, we can never recapture that 3 mills. Next year, we'll get a new index number, and whatever that might be, say that might be 2 mills. But we can never go back and get that 3 mills that the board didn't take. So that is the one harm of Act 1. It really limits your ability to make up in the future what you've lost. But it does make districts hold their taxes down. It limits the ability to raise taxes, but it also sometimes forces districts to increase taxes maybe when they don't need it, just because they can't get it later, because they might have something they know that's coming down the road. So it's a very hard balancing act, and Act 1 made it a lot harder, not a lot easier, because you don't have that ability to go back and get something that you didn't take. So we do have to be careful.
In terms of the Capital Projects Fund, it was initiated roughly at the time that Act 1 came into play in 2006. And it was right after this high school and North Middle School campus project was completed. That was a $120 million project, and it created some significant tax increases across the district in that time frame up to that point. And Dr. Kish suggested, I think wisely so, that we start to collect money in this capital projects fund in order to pay for future renovations. And that indeed was the case. All the elementary schools and the middle schools, other than North, have had significant renovations over the last 12 years that related to the capital projects fund, that were paid out of that fund, rather than increasing taxes per se or going out for a bond issue, which is part of the reason why the debt service is now 6 years off from dropping significantly.
And theoretically, we're going to get to a point in the not too distant future where we have to start that process over again with the buildings. Buildings don't last forever, so the debt service will drop off, but at some point we're going to have to start renovating buildings again and doing those things, because systems only last so long. So part of capital projects is planning for those type of things, putting money aside for those type of things. If you're wealthy enough to do that, some districts don't have any. And what doing that allows you to be able to pay for some of those things down the road without borrowing money and basically paying for it twice. Because some of those long, 30-year bond issues or 20-year bond issues, you end up paying very close to the amount of interest that your principal is. So, you look at your mortgage statement, and when you got your mortgage, and you remember that principal number, you remember how much that interest number was? Now take that times 10 million, 20 million, 30 million, take 60 million if we have to build a building. It's a lot of money to pay in interest. So doing these type of things sometimes frustrates people, and sometimes, people don't like that. They think, you're squirreling away money, but you're planning for the future, and you're actually trying to save money in the future by doing these type of things as a school board. So it is a balancing act, and you are trying to plan for the future, and you're trying to take care not only now, but you're trying to take care of down the road. And when we have to renovate this baby, it's not going to be 10 million.
I mean, I appreciate all of that you do have to have money set aside, and I think the district did a really good job with making it so we wouldn't have to borrow money. But, there is a limit to how much you can just sock away. But, Jeff, I was wondering if we had that study done, and it told us what the lifetime was of our buildings, or how much life, was it the percentage of life left in our buildings? How did that go?
The only thing I remember is when we did the original feasibility study, Dewey came back and said, this building's worth that much and it needs this much renovations. So I think only one building came in where the expense was higher than they recommended, but building life, I mean, our buildings will last forever if we take care of it.
If you maintain.
Yeah. But going back a little bit, so the roof on the high school's 12 years old. It's probably a 30-year roof, could be a 20 or 25, but in another 12 years, you're going to be looking at 5-6 million.
Is it possible to get, not everything, but, sort of an idea, like these are the kinds of things that we might be?
Well, we have that, and
Yeah.
Megan was talking about that a little bit. So we came to you with a 3-year plan. I think we're going to revise that and look out to 6 years.
Yeah.
So when the deficit's off, and see what we can do. We really are in very good shape, but you can't stop.
No.
There's still roofs out there. Deibler and Seiler were not part of the renovations. When I came in 2007, they were done in around 2000, I believe. So they could be the next two schools that we're going to look at in 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Heating, unit vents, window systems, but all in all, our schools are in very good shape. Most of our roofs are done, but not all of them. Heating systems are in good shape, but you can't stop. So, yeah, we're going to look at that. And where we were spending maybe $5 million, $4 million on an average for the last 12 years, the renovations could now go $2 or $3 million for the next couple of years. But, yeah, we can bring that list to you.
And then what do you think would be, how our population of students is supposed to be going down? What about I'm thinking, so we would have theoretically fewer students to have to, pay for, but what about our overall population? We didn't get that number. How are, like the people that are going to be paying the taxes? I'm just thinking, is our money going to also shrink so that the buildings, we wouldn't be able to keep them up, is what I'm asking, making any sense?
The last population estimates that I saw, obviously the census was in 2010, but Bucks County's percentage increase has not been very large, 2 or 3%. And I suspect that's true here as well. The last census, I think the Pennridge, 8 municipalities total 45 to 50,000 people total. That doesn't really answer your question, I'm sorry, but that's as much as I know.
No, my question
to answer
wasn't
your
even
question.
clear. I don't know, I'm trying to think.
I understand your question. Is the tax revenue going to decrease along with
Can you
enrollment?
turn your mic on, please?
I was just really speaking to Joe.
you can't do that.
Well, I was just trying to clarify my own understanding of what Joe was saying, that if the census is going down for our student population, does our tax-paying population go down in correlation to that as well? So our revenue would be affected by also, but it might be a direct correlation, who knows? Yeah. I mean, that's a tough question, I don't know if we can even answer that. I understand what you're saying.
And in 2 years, what will be our major source of revenue? Will there be real estate taxes?
Right.
Or is everything going to go to Harrisburg and be
Right.
divvied up and then be passed out to school districts?
Shuffled out.
And that's a scary thought, to be honest with you.
We're not going to raise taxes to do that.
So any other comments or questions tonight for this meeting? If not, we'll go to public comment. Mrs. Furlong?
Sue Furlong, West Rock Hill Township. Several things came to mind. First would be the LRTA arrangement for the different businesses that come in. Generally speaking, municipalities identify an area and then companies choose to move in. What we're doing is cherry picking which businesses receive LRTA if they decide to make some investment. If we have a deficit, I'm not saying don't do anything with LRTA because it is nice to entice a business to come to your area, but by the same token, it doesn't have to be as generous. What you all received from that business was pure 100% in their favor. It wasn't half and half, and even the payback on the taxes at the 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 puts all of the burden on the school district that when you finally get your portion, it's with a 6, 7, 8, 9 year worth of inflation. So your value is less. I would also look at your fund balances. They are very high. And I would take a couple of different approaches and look and see how you can maximize the value. First of all, I would, you've got a fund balance here and you've got debt where you're paying interest over here. Maybe some of that fund balance should be used to pay off existing debt so that you don't have the interest expense. And then your budget would be balanced because you have less interest expense. Or look at your PEASR fund, divide that out over the next 6 years, because then your debt service drops off by $10 million a year, and you can repurpose that money towards paying PEASRs. You just need to get yourself across those 6 years. And we've got fund balances that are fairly high. And use that PEASR money, at least divided by 6, and then get yourself to the point where now you have a much lower debt service, and you don't have to raise taxes. You don't have the debt expense. And that would be a way to use that PEASR balance to alleviate the taxes, and when you get 6 years out, you don't have your debt service, and so you've offset debt service with PEASRs. And you're not hurting anything. You're not raising taxes. You're just substituting where those funds go. I think that's a reasonable approach. The other problem that you have is that you're not utilizing your study on your building utilization. You're running at about 60 or 70% instead of 85, which is recommended by the state. And I have spoken with them, just so you know where I got my facts. I did speak with people down in Harrisburg, and I can give you names. So it would be like a hotel trying to make a profit at a 60% occupancy rate instead of an 85% occupancy rate. You need to take into account that you're losing 500 students in the next 5 years. And it starts now. Okay, we've already lost 220 over the last 4 years. I don't see that savings incorporated in here because, I guess, maybe we're the teacher hiring association or something like that. You need to economize your classroom space. Perhaps you could even take quite frankly, when I've looked at the numbers, and I'll be glad to share them with you, when you go up to the recommended efficiency rate of your building to 85%, we have an extra building, and we could repurpose that and use it for bringing some of these kids back on our campus by offering services in that freed up building. And so we could generate, or we could either avoid costs or perhaps even generate revenues if we service nearby schools. But you are running at an efficiency rate that would put other businesses out of business. And the way you can do it is you just sign a budget and raise taxes. If you were a private enterprise, you would be efficiently run, or you would be out of business. So you need to look at your building utilization study. You need to raise your efficiency for each building up to 85% on your enrollment, and you will find money falling, even in that study, to close one of the schools, which was one of its recommendations, would save you, I think it was around $2 million a year. So don't ask the taxpayers to pay for your inefficiency. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else, this meeting is adjourned.
I think I'm going to call facilities to order. Any public comment?